and the story was always about us, the English, rising up against tyranny.
I've got several questions for you, and you're the man to be asked these questions. The first question is this: the UK is in a mess. We know we're in a mess. You're pushing for the English Constitution as the answer. Briefly, how is it the answer? Because we're in the UK. If we introduce if we go back to the English Constitution, does that split up the UK? And if we split up the UK and we just look after ourselves, doesn't the fact we have Scotland, Wales, potentially Northern Ireland in disarray, does that affect us? It's a complicated question, I get that. What's your take on that question?
So the first thing I would say is, as an English constitutionalist, and as an Englishman, I'm not British, I would ask people a question before I go into the answer, and it's not difficult. Do you agree Englishmen and women should remain the majority race and culture of England, right, as a nation? So once you pitch that question to people, it brings in a number of different things. One is England is a country. It has its own culture. It has its own legal system. And most importantly, it has its own constitution that was developed well in excess of 1100 years, but England in by 1 year is 1100 years old. Scotland is a separate nation. It has a completely different legal jurisdiction. It's called Roman law. It is a completely different concept to the common law, which gives you the maximum amount of freedom. So the answer is independence and returning to the Constitution. It is the English Constitution that has been attacked. How do I know that? Because the British removed the Constitution and awareness of our Constitution in the early 1970s. Why did they do that? Because we went into the European Union unlawfully against the supremacy clause of the English Bill of Rights. So when you speak to people, typically that are British, and by the way, British is a minority, just to make sure everyone's clear on that, I speak on behalf of the majority, and the majority are English. So the 2011 census, 57% said English only national identity, right? Each one of our constitutional laws that protected us had a story. And the story was always about us, the English, rising up against tyranny. And that is perfectly intact, can be dusted off and used again at any time. And one of the crucial elements of that, and this is what your audience must be aware of, is something called the Act of Settlement 1701. In that constitutional law that protects the English and the Scots, the Irish, and the Welsh, it stated that you could not, let me kill this phone. You could not be a member of Parliament, in the Lords, police constable, or any position of authority or profit, unless both you was born to English parents, plural. All right? So it's really important that people understand, not just one, two of them had to be. And the reason for that was because you had to carry the culture into them positions. You had to carry the knowledge of our Constitution, our liberties and freedoms into those positions. The British Nationality Act of 1948 erased that protection by stealth, not on the face of the bill. It wasn't put to a referendum, and it was brought in by someone called Clement Attlee, who was a Fabian Prime Minister. There are many protections that the English Constitution affords to English men. In fact, the same Acts of Settlement states at Chapter 4 that the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. Thereof means the English. So when I start to talk about the Constitution being the solution, we need to return to it. Once returned to in its original enactments, and the originalists, meaning you'd have to replace a number of judges because they're DEI and they're basically communist in position. Once you go back to an originalist judiciary that interpret the Constitution in the way it was intended by our ancestors, all of our problems start to disappear.
The English Constitution is the solution, always has been and always will be.